On this edition of Owatonna As They Saw It, we're going to pursue the topic of the Bar Association and law in Steele County from many years back with our guest, Mary Walbran, who is a very appropriate person to talk about the early days of the court system here in Steele County and indeed in the 5th District, which involved Steele, Waseca, Rice, and Dodge County. The date of this taping is October the 28th of 1993. And Mary Walbran, it is safe to say, I think, was the first woman female lawyer in the 5th District. One of the few probably at that time when we're talking back in the late 30s in the state of Minnesota, although there were others at the time. And Mary came to Owatonna in 1939. Her husband, John, who was also a lawyer, came to Owatonna in 1936. They were married in 1938, and then a year after you were married, you came here. Mary, we're happy to have you with us. Were you from Waseca? Is that where you grew up, or what?
Yes, I was from Waseca. I was reading Child's History of Waseca County and Steele, Rice County, Steele County, I'm sorry, to try and review people who had been in the practice of law. I found my grandfather, John Moonan's family, came there in 1855, and he started practicing law there in 1887. I can't tell you how the courthouses were then, but I sort of had the law with me all my life.
You have. You gave the name Moonan.
Yes.
Is that from Moonan's Marsh?
Yes, my grandfather owned that farm.
He did?
Yes.
Near Waseca there?
Yes.
I just picked up that name right away, and that's a familiar name in the area for sure. Mary, you went to law school. Where did you go to law school?
I took my pre-law at the College of St. Teresa in Winona, and then I went to the University of Minnesota for part of it, and Creighton. I graduated from Creighton Law School in Omaha in 1937.
In those years, was it more rarity than a common thing to have women in law and studying law?
Yes, at the university there were 7 women in a class of 125. Today there would be at least 40% of the women. And at Creighton I was the only girl in the school at the time I was there.
Were your parents in law or not?
My father was a lawyer, and his 2 brothers were.
Okay. Did he encourage you to pursue this occupation or not?
Yes, he did. Of course, he was the kind of a man who believed in the education of women, and having 5 girls, he had to be prepared for it. And he let us go any way we wanted to, just so we learned shorthand and typing, because he said then he knew we would never starve.
I see. Yeah, if you had those 2 to your credit then.
Yes.
Huh? So when you went to law school, you were really following in the family footsteps. The father's name was
Joseph Moonan.
Joseph Moonan, and your mother was
Ethel Moonan.
Okay. So you grew up, they grew up, they were Waseca County residents.
Not my mother, my father was.
Yeah. So you met John in 1936, who came here, I should say, in 1936. As a lawyer, did he open the Walbran Law Office here?
Yes, he opened in 1936. He got out of law school in 36 and came to Owatonna and opened an office on North Cedar Street over a grocery store. I forget the name of the grocery store, but there was one there.
What, in the 100 block? Or
that's where the Reach Law office is now.
Okay. All right, then there was a grocery store there then, huh?
Yes.
John was from where originally?
He was originally from Tracy, but he moved to, his family moved to Waseca when he was a sophomore in college.
So you met him there then in Waseca,
yes, I did.
I assume, is that right?
Yes.
Where did John take his training then for
He went to the University of Minnesota, and then he went to Creighton Law School.
Why do you think he picked Owatonna? What was the, any particular reason, you think, and why you came? Of course, you came to Owatonna because of your marriage, obviously, but did he have any reason for picking our city?
Well, John had thought about getting his doctor's degree in business, and he had a scholarship to Harvard. And he was discussing it with my father and asking him what he'd want to do. And Dad said to him, what do you intend to do for the rest of your life? And John said, practice law. And Joe said to him, then you might as well get started. And they looked at towns around and decided that Owatonna would be a good town.
I see. Okay.
And as John always said, we were close enough to go home and get something to eat.
You were, because when you came here, you lived where?
We lived on 130. We lived on Rose Street, 351 East Rose Street.
Okay, so close to downtown.
Yes.
Then, huh? In case you missed it at the beginning, this is Mary Walbran. We are talking about Owatonna as they saw it and about the Bar Association and law in the early years as Mary remembers them. I'm Todd Hale, the moderator on this program, and Mary was a part of the Steele County Bar Association back in 1939 when she arrived here in Owatonna, I assume in a part of the 5th District Bar as well. How at that time did you feel that you were treated as a female lawyer in the bar?
I had no problem. I went into my father's office as soon as I got out of law school, and his practice and his brother's practice was quite widespread, and if anyone was needed, they sent me.
They did. Okay.
And I had many experiences and met many of the lawyers who are practicing here.
Mm-hmm. Well, we love to run names by people, those people who were around at that time. And can you kind of run a few names by of who was in the practice of law here when you came?
Yes, Otto and Harold Nelson had their offices up over the First National Bank. And Harold went into service. He was an officer. And Otto kept the practice going. In fact, Otto very nicely asked me if I wanted to have office space with them when John was in service. But I decided to stay where I was.
Okay.
And then there was Sam Lord. Sam had his office up over the Northwest Bank. And he had practiced with a Sawyer who moved to Winona, and Al Goswitz, who went to Arizona and New Mexico and became dean of the New Mexico Law School in and let's see, then there was an older lawyer by the name of Tom Kigland. I never did much work with Tom. And then, of course, there was Helan Leach, and he was Dave Leach's father. And he was city attorney at the time. Fred Alexander was municipal judge, and his office was in the Parrott building up over where the Nelson practice still is. Shortly after I mustn't forget Axel Anderson.
Yes.
And I can't remember the name of the attorney who practiced with Axel, who later went up to the state. But there was Axel and this other lawyer were there.
Okay.
And then about the same time I did, Larry Probst opened his office too.
Okay.
And I think that's the bar in Owatonna at that time. Very few compared to today.
Yes. When did Stella Olson's husband come?
He came shortly after John.
Okay.
Yes.
His first name was?
Art.
Art, yeah.
He always wore the white hat.
He did.
And a cigar.
And he had an office on North Cedar, I think, too, didn't he? As I recall, anyway, at least in the later years. I'm not sure if he did at the beginning.
He was where the dancing studio is now.
Okay, yeah. Sure, and they'll be in the 100 block of Cedar Street.
That's right.
Those are some great names, and those are the early ones. There were those that came after, obviously.
After World War II, Jim Reitz came, I think, in 44, and Wally Tripp and Byron Casey, and I can't think of any of the others.
Okay.
And then Dave Leach came home.
Sure.
And he had been working for an insurance company and going to William Mitchell College of Law.
Okay. The name escapes me at the moment, but I know that when we were downtown one day, we looked on the side of the building by Gillespie Real Estate, which is located there on the corner, and there's a lawyer's name up on the bricks.
Yes, and I don't know who he was.
Yeah, I got the name at one time, and I can't remember what it was, but apparently he wasn't too well or didn't stay around too long or whatever, because I couldn't get too much on him.
No, we mustn't forget Frank Dunham. He was here for a long time.
Now, back then, there was two different judges. There was a municipal judge, right, and there was a district court judge. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, and then in the smaller towns around, like Blooming Prairie, there were justices of the peace.
Okay.
And they could conduct court in their own place of business. I remember trying a case in Blooming Prairie where we did it over a jewelry store counter.
You did.
The municipal court was in the fire hall, and Fred Alexander was there when we came, and then Dave Leach was municipal judge for a long time.
Yes. How do you remember the courthouse, the courtroom, when you first came here? Is it quite a bit different now than it was back then?
I think my memory goes back a little further. I was trying to figure that out. The second floor of the courthouse was all one courtroom. It was huge. And the only other space was the law library and the judges' chambers.
Oh, I see.
Then sometime in that period of time, they divided it and made it into a smaller courtroom. But it was a tremendous courtroom. It was huge, and there is a third floor over it.
Yes, there is. It's no longer used.
It was an interesting building, and it used to hold a crowd. The system back at that time was that there was a call of the calendar for each county set up by statute. And in Steele County, it was September and May. And on the day set, as I recall, in Steele County, it was the first day of May and the first day of September, the first Friday of September and the first Friday of May. The lawyers who had anything coming up before the judge had to file what was called a note of issue, saying they were ready to try the case. And they were printed up into a book form about the size of a paperback. And they divided into civil law and criminal law.
Okay.
And then Judge Sen was the district judge at that time. And he would open up each session and set up the dates for trial. And you were supposed to be ready to try it when it came up.
You were.
Because there were so many lawyers together, it was almost a social occasion. And many cases were settled at that time because people would have time to talk and visit. And we now have a running term of court. The judge can set the cases whenever he wants to.
Yes.
And of course, they are very cooperative. Judge Sen died in 41, And Axel Anderson was appointed district judge and remained there until he resigned along in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went back in practice with Sam Lord.
I see. And following Axel in the court, the judge,
There was a judge from Faribault, Urban Steinman.
I remember him, yes.
Yes, and he was judge for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we, Judge Hale, now that's really a lapse of memory. I can't remember whether it was Judge Hale first and then Judge Steinman, but I think it was. Judge Hale died when he was very young. I think he was about 47 years old. He was a judge who was liked very well.
Yes.
Of course, now we have Casey Christian, who we all know real well.
That's right.
And we have visiting judges.
Again, the date of our taping is 1993, October the 28th, and so we're referring to some of the present time, but also those years, the early years of the Walbrans. You moved your law office then from North Cedar Street when? And where did you go?
When John was in service, Sam Lord and I came over one afternoon and suggested that perhaps John and he would make a good combination, and that we should join our offices. And John came home for a leave, and we met, and then we moved up over the Northwest Bank.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think the bank has a bookkeeping
Yes,
office
right.
up there.
There at present.
We both had our offices there, and we shared a library.
And then you moved to
We moved in
Main Street.
1963 to Main Street. When Axel joined Sam, we decided that it was best that we were practicing different kinds of law, that we separate that partnership. And then we moved in '63 when we had an opportunity to buy the Shea House.
I see. At that time, that was probably next to the Associated Church, I assume. Is that right?
That's right.
When you moved there.
It was the beautiful vines on that building.
I remember the vines, always on the front, yes.
What I'll never forget is when they were taking that building down, and the cement floor in that building must have been, I don't know how thick, but the construction workers would drop something real heavy on it and then take out the pieces.
Was that right?
And we went through quite a time.
It shook the house, I
Yes.
assume. Now they're almost dwarfed by the Federated building next to you, aren't you?
Well, we've tried to keep our personality in
Yes.
the age of the house.
And indeed you have. Your son, Mark, is in law.
Yes.
And any other children of yours in law?
Yes, I have two sons in law. Jack is a corporate attorney and tries cases for McDonnell Douglas aircraft factory. He's in St. Louis. Presently, he's trying a case in Washington that's going to take a long time. Joe is with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he's in their criminal division. He is the one who prosecuted the bank robbers that held up the Northwest Bank.
He was, okay.
And Mark is in Owatonna in our office and is city attorney. Anne is married to Dean Reitz, and she just got her master's in business administration.
Okay.
And at St. Thomas, which is a wonderful facility that Mr. Gainey gave to the town.
Yes.
And Sheila is married to a lawyer who's in real estate work in Bloomington. She is a guidance counselor at Armstrong High School in Robbinsdale.
Did you have, or John have, any brothers or sisters that were in law?
I had a sister who was in law. She, my youngest sister. The other 3 girls married lawyers.
Okay, so it's been truly a
Yes.
lawyer-filled family, has it
Yes.
not? When we go back to those days when the courthouse, the full second floor was the courtroom, do you remember any specific cases that filled the place that were of specific interest to the people and citizenry?
No, I don't, not at that time. That reflects more when I was traveling around with my father and Ray Moonen. A case that I had to try that filled the courtroom was a criminal case called State against Bolsinger. And it was one of the first cases brought in state of Minnesota called criminal negligence. Now it's called vehicular murder. And a man had left the Al's Tavern out at where the road to Meriden turns south.
Okay, Al's Tavern, yes.
And they had been traveling around Waseca County that day, and I think testing all of the taverns, I think making a survey. And they apparently got into an argument, and Mrs. Bolsinger got up and started walking toward Owatonna. And he rushed out of the place, and this is according to the evidence that was given, and ran her down with the car. We could get no evidence that he had done it on purpose. The sheriff at that time was Ted Helgeson, and he was a wonderful sheriff, hardworking, and he was the only one in the office then because his deputy had been called up for service. And so there was Ted in the sheriff's office, and I was in the county attorney's office. Just incidentally, I was paid the sum of $200 a month and $40 a month clerk hire.
Really?
Mary was glad she wasn't working for me at the time. My secretary, Mary Cabista, my legal assistant, Mary Cabista, is here with me today, and I wanted to say that.
Yes.
She has been with me since 1963. She came over and she said, I want a job with a challenge.
And
she's still getting it.
She's still getting a challenge, yes, that's for sure.
That case is interesting, the Bolsinger case. I got out of line because the people defending him, the lawyers, were Pete Madden, who was an old Waseca lawyer who had studied law in my grandfather's office back when you could do that, and Henry Gallagher, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and had just retired from that job, and they were defending him. And I remember so clearly, I was standing at the edge of the end of the jury facing the judge's bench, and I had been told, and I had a lot of help from Sam Lord, and John, that you should try and get as much of the story in to the opening statement, because you start a case with an opening statement. And Judge Gallagher objected, and in doing so, he referred to me as the little lady, and I rather resented that. He had a right to do it, I guess. He was my uncle and godfather, but I resented it. Judge Anderson let me go on.
He did.
We eventually convicted the man.
I see. Mary Walbran, let me ask you a final question, and that is, law today in 1993 as compared to law in 1939 when you came to Owatonna. Has it changed a lot for the better, for the worse, or what, do you think?
It's changed a lot, and in some ways I think it's changed for the better. People try to settle cases, and we've got our law library growing, and incidentally that's been moved over to the Owatonna Public Library. It is very, very handy. And we have what's called Westlaw, which is a computer type that we can get cases that we want without driving into Minneapolis. The judges exchange counties more often, so you have a variety of judges. The one nice thing about Owatonna, back from the very beginning, everyone is friendly. The lawyers get along well together. They were all very nice to me when I came to Owatonna. And then after the war, they started a very active Steele County Bar Association, and we have lunch on the first Friday of every month. And another nice thing that I think is that there are more women in the practice of law here. And Federated has, for one of their chief counsels, has a very lovely woman, Debbie Remine. And then there are two women who specialize in family law, Kate Furness and her associate.
Yes.
And it's just good.
I truly have enjoyed knowing this lady in the years that I have known her. At her age, I don't know if you want to give your age, but she still spends time in the office every day, right?
Yes, I tell my clients I can get Social Security.
That's right.
That's all they need to know.
Mary Walbran, Owatonna and Steele County Law as she saw it in the early days, and we hope that you have enjoyed hearing the story that she has to tell, and she has been so much a part of the Bar Association all the years she has been here, and we appreciate her sharing her remembrances of the days when she came to Owatonna back in the late 30s, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's a long time to be in practice here.
I hope that I remembered everybody who practiced at the time. And if I didn't, I'll blame it on age.
Okay.
I also apologize for my throat. I don't know why it's...
You have done fine, Mary. We appreciate having you with us. Mary Walbran, the first woman lawyer in the 5th District, Steele, Waseca, Rice, and Dodge County, and we have enjoyed having her with us. Thank you again. This is another in the series of Owatonna As They Saw It, as we look at some of the